just to remind you who's here, we've got Donal O'Mahony, he's head of UX and design at Fleetmatics. Fleetmatics is an Irish tech company that was actually founded above a shop in Terranure, as far as I remember. Temple Oak, sorry. And it was sold last year for 2.4 billion, like this. Okay, I'm a bit like a rapper. So it was sold last year for 2.4 billion to Verizon, and that's one of the biggest US telecoms companies in the world. We have Cheryl Kennedy, who's Director of Digital Design and Data Services at Barclaycard, and I understand you just love technology and have been building things since you were a kid. That's what your bio says. And Nina, who works at Accenture and is Managing Director in charge of Management Consulting, and you're very heavily involved in the DOC, which is the new Accenture Design Development Centre in Dublin. So I'll just start, guys. Digital transformation is the term of the day, but when I was starting out, it used to be just called IT projects. What's going on? I'll start with you, Nina. And as I said, we only have one mic, so I'm going to have to pass it along.
Thanks. Yeah, so I suppose there's a lot of different ways to think about digital transformation, and I suppose my role as Accenture Interactive Lead, we are the agency within Accenture, and for us, we see ourselves as an experience agency. So for me, it's around, transforming the customer experience. But in order to do that, you need to transform how you operate as an organization. So you need to look at your business model. What is it you're trying to achieve as the organization? What is your North Star? How are you going to disrupt the marketplace? What are the operational processes required to do that? How do you need to, reorientate your business around the customer? And ultimately, kind of what is the technology and innovation required to do that? It's this kind of, I suppose I would sum it up in three ways. One is, how do you reimagine the experience from a customer perspective? How do you reorientate your business around that? And how do you kind of flex your technology platforms to deliver on those experiences? So there's a lot to be said about it, but that would be my way to sum it up.
Well, I take it. So I guess since we were one of the first SaaS companies in the connected vehicle space, we were already digital. So I agree with you, it's a very strange term. Everything's digital really at this stage. So our transformation was then rather about how do we move to software, how do we move to the web. It was actually a cloud-based product before the cloud, if that makes sense. That we were all then about our transformation was actually the lean transformation or the CI/CD transformation or DevOps or now the UX transformation or design-led, that controversial term. But basically it means that your products are well designed. And you use design thinking. So our transformation is more around that side rather than, we should really jump on this digital bandwagon,
Okay.
I would say that digital transformation in our organisation is it's ongoing. So we are digital now. We're here. Where we're at is continuing that to the next stage of end-to-end. So not just focusing on the customer, but also you're talking about process, but the whole culture, we're still, and our staff, because we've got areas where the mind is willing, but the body is weak. So that's all about the long-term investment in transforming our internal technology, back-end systems, but also the tools that our actual staff use, because we went through pushing out a lot of great stuff for our customers and then essentially asking our staff to work on the equivalent of abacuses. So that's been absolutely critical with taking us on the journey and getting that buy-in and investment for long-term back-end strategic change. And that takes bravery from the top, because you're going to sacrifice some of your short-term results in investment for those kind of infrastructure projects.
Actually, let's stick with you for a moment, because the interesting thing about it is when we think of user experience, UX is a term that's kind of really grown up in the last 3 years. But when I was just thinking this the other day, I was talking to a friend of mine who's a branding expert, and when I think about brands anymore, I don't think about the nice logo or how they look. I think about how I've experienced that brand, whether I like their app, whether I like the different aspects of, will I go back and use that again, in terms of whether it's an app or it's a service. In terms of Barclaycard and the competitive landscape you guys find yourself in, because you're in a situation where, a lot of these new neobanks, for example, N26 and others are emerging, and they're trying to win people over by ease of use, lower costs for traditional banking services. The whole banking world has been transformed inside out So when it comes to digital transformation as a competitive advantage or a way of fighting back or holding back the Mongols on this one, how do you do that? How do you do that?
So it's actually multi-thread strategy from making sure, for instance, we've got accelerators, so working with startups. So we're doing a lot of investment in terms of not just trying to develop within, but bringing partnerships in and working with fintechs in order to get competitive advantage. But we also have a lot of money pumped into innovation, working within the organisation, so a lot of experimentation. So we're doing things with artificial intelligence. We're looking at all the different latest pieces. I've just completely forgotten Bitcoin, but not Bitcoin, the infrastructure behind it. We're doing a lot of those sorts of things. So we test and learn across our organisation, and also we do take advantage of our size in terms of some of the rollouts. So you've seen things like Ping It, you've seen how we keep leading on some of the payments pieces and just pushing on that with the investment. As I said, I think we're just going to keep working on that, but you've then got to keep, I'm going to get going, but you've got to work on the inside as well as the outside. So that's how we're fighting back. We're aware of the challenges, and it's just, I think our leadership right now is, we really are getting, everybody talks it, but there's a difference between talking digital transformation and then when you start to feel it through the entire bones and body of the organisation, and we're definitely at that point.
And just in terms of Fleetmatics and its new role in the Verizon world, I mean, I view the acquisition of you guys by Verizon as Verizon trying to reimagine its identity for the next 20 years, even looking at their acquisition of AOL and Yahoo, the creation of Oath, these digital brands that are emerging. It's very much to me like you guys represent that change of culture for those guys. Can you tell me how you are fitting in there and how, mergers and acquisitions aren't easy, and I just imagine how you guys are informing the future digital identity of brands like Verizon.
Wow, that's a
big question.
Is this being recorded? So it's a great question because the first event I attended in Atlanta was last year, and as I sat there, I realized, wow, this is actually the company is pivoting or moving. I knew I'd read it in emails, but this was now about products as opposed to the network, as opposed to what we would associate with a company like Verizon or other networks. That's at saturation point. So their play in many other companies is now obviously on the content and on the data. And the more they discussed it, and the more the figures in relation to our industry and the profitability in Fleetmatics, I was like, wow, we're actually at the center of this. And I expressed it afterwards. I said, this is quite overwhelming. And I was told it's okay to be overwhelmed because it's like a candy shop at the moment, and what they're, to your question, what they're investing in to diversify. But it's not random diversification. Everybody's like, what are they doing buying Yahoo or AOL or Fleetmatics or trucks? And it actually is a very compelling story that I can get into a little bit, but not too much. But yeah, that is, I guess, to answer your first question, that's the real digital transformation that's occurring on the Verizon side that we're part of. It's very exciting.
I'll just ask Nina a question. Nina, in Accenture, you guys pretty much work with other companies that are trying to realize their digital transformation, and everything from UX comes into it. But you guys, you have, and I would urge anybody here who has a chance to go and visit their dock down in Silicon Docks. It's quite cool actually, and it's not just a tech. There's designers, there's developers there, there's social media experts. It's a whole hodgepodge. I would imagine there's even anthropologists there for all I know. But the whole thing is really, I suppose, putting a stamp on how we could look at Accenture in the future. Because when I look at management consulting brands of the past, I see a lot of beige and traditional corporate suits, but you guys are changing that.
Yeah. So, so the dock in Dublin, we launched officially probably around February of this year. And the dock is a global innovation centre based here out of Dublin, which is fantastic for us in Ireland. We're creating a significant number of new jobs. And actually what's really interesting is 80% of our employees in the dock are new to Accenture. So Accenture would traditionally have been a model where you come in as a graduate at a university and you grow your way through the organization. But, you know, in terms of what we're trying to do in the dock, we need a new set of skills. We need, you know, we've kind of built it around 3 core things, which is designers, to really kind of bring in design thinking, design expertise into, you know, kind of reimagining sort of the future with these organizations. We have developers, so, you know, really building prototypes, minimum viable products, and then domain expertise, which can be anything from the industry to artificial intelligence, machine learning. So the dock is really designed to work with our clients to help them reinvent their future and also to reinvent the future for Accenture and really kind of build new sort of assets, tools to really help our clients accelerate their growth. So it's a really exciting time for us, and it's a completely different culture to the traditional Accenture. And I think it's you know, it's about time consultancies, you know, kind of change their culture, and we need to be much more, I suppose, you know, kind of really just work better with clients, bring in that design thinking expertise and those really specialized skills. So the culture within the dock and within the acquisitions we've made within Accenture over the last number of years, you were talking about acquisitions, is really building this culture of cultures and bringing in that new expertise that's really required. So very exciting times.
When I think of exciting times, I usually get nervous. But you know, when new things are introduced, I'm in the business of change, and I write about change, and I'm in one of the most changed industries in the world in terms of what digital has done. I mean, when I imagine what you can do with digital today, and if I imagined it 20 years ago, I would have thought it would be revolutionary for journalism even, and journalism has been torn inside out. And every time there's a new process introduced, like, you know, we need to do something with social media, or we need to do something with video, I nearly have a meltdown every time. For someone who has to deal with change a lot, I struggle with change a bit, and I have to kind of go, whoa, and I have to learn it, and once I'm comfortable with it, then I embrace it. But the thing about change, and you touched on it, Cheryl, was when you talk about root and branch change driven by digital transformation, how do you get people who would be in traditional industries and in traditional mindsets to embody a world where, you know, the first touch point with a customer will be through that mobile phone screen. You know, there's a book that comes to mind, Who Moved My Cheese? And people come to, you know, changing how they do things and how they've done things. I've done this for 40 years, why should I do this now?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because we've experimented with different things, like where you set up a different team that's purely in the new way of working, and then as opposed to being infected by sort of the traditional. But then you're not really taking the rest of the organisation, the traditional, if you like, on that journey with you. And this is what I was saying about kind of really feeling it in the fabric. I've seen it start-stop for many years, where we've started, we've pushed out the comms and everything else, and there's been big hoo-has around how we operate. We are digital, but then you kind of look underneath the covers, and it's still not quite there. I think it's taken the broader world changing for us to be in a position, and everybody in a position, like, you know, like now, everybody has access to social media. We live in a digital world. You've got your children who live in a digital world. Therefore, your organisation has an imperative to change, because you know that your job's at risk, or that you are missing out if you don't keep up and understand. So I think that actually, as well as forcing it and trying to push it, it's now happening organically, and it's just supporting that organic shift.
Good. Donal, you guys are, I suppose, laying the plumbing of the digital tapestry or canvas in which all this has been drawn. And when you think about it, you guys are putting a SIM card in every truck, for example, and you monitor everything from, you know, how long a vehicle is idling and all that kind of stuff, and how much that is costing a business. But you're basically rubbing up against very traditional industries. There's a telecoms industry that is in the business of change, but stubbornly so, and it moves from 3G to 4G, eventually 5G, Internet of Things, broadband. How do you guys find yourself in this particular world where, you know, the haulage business even is a traditional business?
I mean, Tesla are showing sneak peeks of their self-driving truck, but that is the biggest job in many states in America, is truck driver, because it's a really big place, and you don't want to be flying that stuff around too much. It's expensive. So that is a huge amount of change going on. Is it going to happen overnight? Absolutely not. I would say that where it's really exciting is we deal with compliance issues as well, like tachographs and logbooks, and but once we're piped into that, also smart cities for planning, for black spot detection, for parking, all this sort of stuff is starting to, as you say, the plumbing or the foundations for this. So a driver may have to take a break, may have to rest. They stop driving. It's acknowledged. It's automated. It's you know, the Alexa piece was great as well because it's very relevant, hands-free for my industry. And then what they do in that break or how content is served up to them. So again, Huffington Post has been acquired as well, and other content providers. So it's just an incredible time to be working in this space. On all angles, from consultancy to banking to telecoms. And I really think we're getting to a point now where we're not competing. Everybody is just getting on this enormous bus.
And Nina, yourself, you advise businesses of all hues, all kinds of sizes, big businesses, small businesses, mostly big businesses. But in terms of how you help them navigate this change, are some embracing it or some fighting it?
I think every organisation knows they need to change or risk becoming redundant. So I think every organisation is facing it. I think the challenge is where do they need to start, and how do they digitally transform their organisation? And one of your questions was there: is there a playbook for this? Sadly, no. Because every organisation is different, and where they start and where they go to depends on what they're trying to achieve. We go in and we help organisations. I think the most important thing is that you have the backing of the leadership team and the CEO, because without that, it is such a challenge. And if he is behind that, and that then transforms the culture, the ways of working, Cheryl, which you were talking about within the organisation. The whole organisation is rotating itself to become this digital organisation. What we tend to do is we tend to start, we always recommend starting with the customer and working backwards. So identifying, what is the experience you're trying to deliver to your customers, really understand what the pain points are today. Simple things like mapping out what is the current journey, where are the pain points, and then looking at, okay, how do you address those pain points? Look at what other organizations are doing. Look across industry, and that's a key one, because a few years ago, some of the banks used to say to us, don't tell me what other industries are doing. I want to look at just banking. That is not, you can't do that anymore. And Cheryl's nodding madly there. So by really doing that research up front, really understanding what, where the problems are, then it's around, okay, how do I solve for those problems? And, it's about working through, okay, where do we want to get to? What is our North Star? And then identifying how do you get there. And I think a big roadmap of 3 years is not going to work in the new world. It's around testing and learning, getting some ideas up front, getting them out to the market, see what customers have to say. So, yeah, there is no playbook, but I think, and I think many organizations don't do this, is start with your customer first.
I realise we're all at stands for you in lunch right now, so just the final question really is, so we've gone from a world of IT projects to this new term, digital transformation, to what next? When everything is digitally transformed, does it ever end? Is this going to ever end? What's the next thing?
What was it? The next thing? It's never going to end. This is the world we live in, and so I think the next thing is always about one, trying to anticipate the next thing. So that cross-industry thing is keeping an eye on the bigger picture, keeping an eye on the outliers in terms of the customer base, and trying to predict what's coming along and get in front of it. Rather than, especially with ourselves, we prefer not to be a fast follower, but we try and be a leader in some of the innovation spaces. And also, what's next, and I think that cross-industry thing, and I'm going to say it again, is taking a learns from everywhere and anything. It's throwing out what you think you know, and just reimagining what you don't know or you might not ever think of, if that makes sense. And I don't think we do enough of that. We're always trying to, like what's that competitor doing, what that person's doing. This is about true imagination for the next 50, 60, 100 years. And we don't do enough looking that far out for just theorizing and then what that and hypothesizing with different scenarios around what does that mean for our business. That's not often done.
Donal?
I would say the next thing, now that we go through this digital transformation phase, will just be constant transformation. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. So I'd say the next thing would be user-centered, customer-centered, whichever you prefer. And I don't mean that for the UX team or whatever it will become. I mean it for every member of staff, every CEO. One example of that would be a case study where a shower head design company, they became the fastest selling shower head on Amazon. And it was done through actually observational ethnographic research. And what did that mean? It actually meant getting in the shower with the customer. So, and everyone laughs at that, but they had breakthrough after breakthrough by sitting in, I'm guessing they were in shower things, but it was the full deal. They also had two-way mirror stuff, and people were, they were scanned for whether they were crazy or not on both sides. But they had breakthroughs that you always fiddle with the connector. Hello, lunch queue. They break with the connector, and they're putting their hand up, and every shower head had that problem. They just put the dial that you change the settings just out of the way of the stream. From looking and talking and observing in the presence of the people who use your fecking product. So it'll be user-centered, and that will be for engineering, it will be for, obviously, where Accenture is going as well, being very focused on that as well, and for every level, every current silo will become the one team, ideally customer-focused.
So what next? I mean, I think obviously technology has a huge role to play in this, and innovation, and Internet of Things, and AI, and machine learning. That's kind of a given. I'll kind of give it to you from our perspective, which is really helping our clients digitally transform. And I think it's going to be much more a change in the way organizations work with the likes of consultancies or agencies around really connecting that customer journey end to end. And where we're beginning to work with many of our clients is on an outcome-based model. So we actually get paid for one large automotive company for every car that we sell. So it's based on kind of attributing that sale back to digital channels. So it's going to be very much driven around data, measurement, and really focusing on outcomes as opposed to, measuring sort of NPS as an experience measure. Yeah.
Okay, I think we managed well with one mic, first in my life, but there we go. So thanks for bearing with us, and that was very interesting, guys. So thanks again. Thank you.
Thanks,